As I am studying English literature, one thing that I often remind myself of is my identity as a Korean. And I like to think about how English literature can be relevant in understanding this country and the issues concerning it. So I thought it may be interesting to do a YouTube project on this theme, namely literature and Korea. As the first part of the project, I would like to talk about Shakespeare. I'm not specializing in this great English playwright, and to be frankly, do not have sufficient knowledge to talk about him. So it will be very challenging for me to talk about Shakespeare with regard to his relationship with Korea. But I took a winter class a while ago about Shakespeare and how he's adapted globally. And one play that I came to know about as part of my research for the class was worth introducing in that regard, I thought. So here it is. It is an adaptation of Shakespeare's play The Tempest, and those making the adaptation were Korean and the Japanese playwright and stage producers Song Gi-young and Junosuke Tara. The fact that this collaboration was made by a Korean-Japanese duo is significant in that, like the main characters in The Tempest, the two countries have animosity to address between them, stemming from Japan's 35-year-long colonial rule of the Korean Peninsula that began from the early 20th century. The enmity in The Tempest, a play that is meant to be comedy, is resolved with a person seeking revenge, Prospero, forgiving his enemies, including his brother Antonio. But can such reconciliation occur easily between Korea and Japan when there is a vast difference in their views on history and how they can move on from the past? That is the question to be raised over this adaptation of The Tempest. There was a certain expectation about its success, because the duo already proved the knowledge and the sensitivity that the colonial past between the two countries requires a nuanced approach. They previously collaborated on Kamome, an adaptation of Anton Chekhov's The Seagull, set in Korea under Japan's occupation in the 1930s. The story aptly described a story of love and conflict among Koreans and the Japanese artist, earning an award from South Korea's 동아일보 Theater Awards in 2013. The Tempest, however, appeared to be a more challenging project for them. Despite its ambition, the strategies used to execute it drew criticism, particularly over its plot and the characters. The play is set in the 1920s. Fictional Korean Emperor Yi Tae-hwang is living in exile on a remote island in the South China Sea, along with his once princess daughter So-eun. Mastering magic as a way of regaining the country's sovereignty, he causes a typhoon, tearing apart a cruise ship that was passing by the island. Aboard the ship is a Japanese government delegation returning from a visit to Britain, including its leader Kaneyasu Saidaiji, a Japanese nobleman who played a significant role in Japan's usurpation of Korea, and Lee Myung-gong, Tae-hwang's younger brother, who betrayed him and his country and stood on the Japanese imperialist side. The story, if it were meant to be a faithful adaptation, would revolve around the development of the relationship between Lee and his adversaries. However, the story, as it goes to great length to avert confrontations and eventual resolutions between Korea and Japan, emphasizes instead confrontations between Lee and his indigenous servant Yan Kuli, and does make it a centerpiece of the story, particularly toward its end. As Yi is distracted by Yan's insurgency, two Japanese assassins kills Yi, and almost all the people shipwrecked manage to return to Japan, including Saidaiji's son, who was supposed to marry his daughter So-eun if it were to follow the original storyline. Instead, Sohn marries Yan, and they live together happily on the island with a Japanese cook and his Korean sidekick joining them. Yi's death at the hands of the two Japanese nationalists may accentuate the actuality of history between Korea and Japan, and its pervasive emotional effects on both sides. Avoiding a happy ending between Sohn and the Saidaiji son is also understandable, as it could oversimplify the complexity of the Korea-Japan relations. However, it removes the possibility of a redemption for the concerned characters and the parties. That also reduces potential space for deliberation on colonial issues that the adaptation may have expanded further from the original by trading a crosstown rivalry in Italy for an asymmetric relations between a colonizer and the colonized. A Typhoon's Tale takes a more modern and a nuanced approach than Politicians by denying a simple and a fairy-like possibility of a reconciliation between Korea and Japan. But by doing so, it creates additional issues to be reconciled, including characters and the plot, which combine to compromise the quality of the play. It will be too harsh, however, to assess this adaptation only based on such potential defects, because those issues are to some extent a byproduct of touching on a subject too controversial and divisive to solve. With two polarizing views on history hanging over the head of everyone involved, and forcing them to take sides, it's difficult to explore a middle ground without catering to one side over another. The writer of the adaptation, Sung, says he thought that indicating any possibility of a reconciliation between the two countries, let alone resolving their colonial enmity, would be such an overwhelming project, and that it would be sufficient just to explore why then reconciliation is so difficult. The adaptation proves that even raising such a question can be challenging. Such a conundrum may ensue any cultural project intended to inspire real-world politics, no matter how good intent it is driven by, as long as respective issues are yet to be solved. And that may be the reason why Shakespeare cleverly avoided taking on contemporary politics and touched only upon the events that were resolved to the point of being viewed from a certain perspective, the victor's perspective, as is often the case. However, the efforts to write a new tale of the Tempest should continue, as it can give us a new perspective on the issue and let us think about it better than before. The production team of A Typhoon's Tale candidly admit the shortcomings of the project, which was partially attributed to the lack of time for preparations. Given such modest reflection on trials and errors, one would expect to see a more thorough, yet equally creative and engaging collaboration from the same production team on a similar issue. If only there is next time.